The Racing Pod
on Off the Ball
with William Hill. Best odds guaranteed on all Irish and UK racing. 18 plus. See gamblingcare.ie.
Welcome to episode 31 of The Racing Pod on Off the Ball with Duggan and Johnny Ward. Remember, we're here every week with analysis, race previews, tips, stories, interviews and the crack. The first half of the pod each week is free to air. The second part is exclusively for members. So be sure to sign up by going to offtheball.com/join. This week for members, we're going to focus on Saturday's card at the Curragh and the weekend handicaps as well at the Kildare track. So be sure to subscribe now. Johnny, how are you getting on?
I'm very well, JD. Very well.
The Dubai Duty-Free Irish Derby 405 on Sunday. A race that has produced some great horses over the years. Monjeu, Nijinsky, Ballymoss 1957 would go on to win the Arc for Vincent O'Brien. Shergar, El Gran Senor, Old Vic, Galileo. Plenty of winners that have graced the top of the game.
Plenty of winners, yeah, and I suppose we'll cut to the chase a bit, JD. You know, you said to me beforehand I haven't read Brian O'Connor's piece yet, and I'm just looking at it here and I'm getting a quick synopsis, and it's very, very simple. He's saying, you know, the race is losing its lustre, but it needs to go back to the mile and two. The counterpoint would be that the horses that you mentioned, the really good horses that have won it, even in recent years, like Auguste Rodin won it last year, albeit he was a short price. You had Jack Hobbs Harz in Australia. Good horses winning it, and it's a much, much fairer test than Epsom. This is the whole thing. Like, the Curragh is a really fair racetrack. You know, it's 2 miles from the 2 mile starting down. There's no turning. There's basically one turn. It's not an oval. It's hard enough to get into trouble at the Curragh. It's completely different to Epsom. Epsom is closer to Bellewstown, we'll say, than Epsom would actually be a bit like Bellewstown, much more like Bellewstown, we'll say, compared to the Curragh. So you can imagine running the Derby at Bellewstown, with all due respect to Bellewstown. So the Curragh is a far better place to run a Premier mile and a half race, or any race, than Epsom. But the problem is Epsom has kind of held on to its grandeur and lustre, and the Irish Derby, for whatever reason, is struggling. And Brian O'Connor's article in the Irish Times starts with, and Brian is essentially the premier racing journalist in Ireland now, who's now writing for the industry papers. It's time to acknowledge how Irish Derby is looking worryingly dated, and that's a fair point.
I would kind of disagree. I think Epsom does test a lot of different facets of a colt, of a 3-year-old, say in a Derby, where you're going uphill, you're having to get a position, you have to be able to travel, be in the right spot, then you're hurtling downhill, and then you have to be balanced to rise in the camber at the end. So I do kind of understand what it does test. On the point around, I think Richard Farsall was writing in the Post during the week.
He did, yeah.
About the crowd numbers. Over 30,000 in 2005, approximately 11,000 people last year. That's what, you're losing, 2/3 of your racegoers going to the Derby. Now, obviously, television and smartphones have made life a little bit different. But even when I was growing up, the Budweiser Irish Derby was a big day. It was a cultural and social occasion. And despite the redevelopment, and I think the Curragh, the new facility is fantastic, but it did cost $80 million. And it just seems that vibe where people might go to Punchestown or to Galway or to Leopardstown is not translating to the Curragh.
Well, it isn't. It's simple as that. You know, it's had a lot of problems even since the redevelopment, where initially there was a suspicion that it was kind of a tiered admission system, and there was a lot of security, and that Richie Forrest alluded to this in the piece in the Racing Post, that it was a security heavy sort of Curragh that wasn't all that friendly necessarily, and mistakes probably were made by the previous sort of management. That's fair enough. Pat Keogh came in briefly, definitely did a good job, and you know Pat, you know how well he did at Leopardstown and all of that. He came in. But the problem with the Curragh was that it had alienated locals for some time. And I'm not saying that because I'm not saying that on the basis that I'm a local, but it's been told to me often enough that it is 100% true. I do a podcast with Vincent Finnegan on Mondays, and he often references this, that the locals don't go to the Curragh. That's a big problem, JD. But when you go there and you see the facility, it's the only modern racetrack in Ireland for me. If you go to the Curragh, it feels absolutely modern. No other racetrack does, and that's because most of them are quite old, and even redevelopments are, you know, they're bit parts. But the Curragh feels like a modern Irish racetrack. It's a fantastic facility, but you have to get people to go. And for me, the Curragh needs to work harder on getting corporate days out there. I still feel that if you sent a bunch of people from a load of staff from Dublin or from wherever to a day out or night out the Curragh, they'd really enjoy it. I think they really need to work harder on that. They need to work on get the locals back, and I think they are working on that. And they massively need to get the railway station back. I've said this a million times. It's a complete no-brainer. I know it costs a lot of money, but Brian Kavanagh has said before that the Curragh could become a park and ride every other day of the week. And if you had a railway jaunt from Galway, from Kerry, from Cork, from Waterford, from Dublin, from essentially from Belfast as well, with a link over, and you got off at the Curragh, you're right at the stop, you get back to Dublin in say half an hour, you get back anywhere in the country, it'd be a brilliant day out, and it would bring back echoes of the past as well. And it does sadden me to see how the Curragh is struggling in that regard. And the problem is, even like, you're talking about a crowd of say 11 or 12,000 on Sunday, which it will be. I was there 2 years ago. I couldn't go last year. I was there 2 years ago. Really enjoyed it. But the Curragh actually it would struggle to facilitate much more than 12,000. I think technically it can allow for about 18,000, but the days of 30,000 are long gone. They used to have the infield as well. Now, I don't really remember the Budweiser Irish Derby, but they used to have like parties around the infield. And you might have seen in Royal Ascot, there was a lot of footage of like various parts of the racetrack where there's a lot of fun being had. And the Curragh really needs, like, I think it should definitely spend a lot more money on putting bums on seats here, like, and literally doing what it should be doing, because it is becoming a strain for HRI, which owns a large minority of it now, and it's becoming difficult for Irish racing to justify the money that was spent because people are not really going.
Yeah, there was a time, as I said, with the Budweiser Derby, the sponsorship. I was there probably about 20 years ago, and it felt like it was a really big social day, and a lot of people travelling from Dublin. And Ferry House have kind of got that right with the Irish National. A lot of young people going. Don't know about their massive interest in the sport, but as a day to be seen, to go to the Irish National, it's a thing now. Leopardstown at Christmas is a thing to be seen at, and obviously you'll have the racing purists as well. But I just feel like Curragh's lost a bit of that connection with somebody. Well, at the Derby, it's a really big day in the Irish sporting calendar, and I have to go to the Derby, dress up, have a good day. And I think the transport links are a big part of what you're saying there. And I was down there a couple of years ago. The facility is fantastic. It's 21st century. It's what you want. It's modern. Really enjoyed the facility. Thought it was, this is state of the art stuff. But there's a disconnect between the beautiful facility and actually getting people to make an appointment, which they're not doing. Doesn't help as well that these things are always on around the time of All-Ireland quarterfinals. And Euro's been on TV and all that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, they have tinkered with the race time. They have tried with things. I do feel, with respect to Aidan O'Brien, the fact that he's been so dominant in the race, where you've had a lot of fairly uncompetitive Irish derbies, like that simply does not help. And Aidan O'Brien has gone on the record and saying, we don't want to win all the time. We want this to be competitive. Like, you need proper competition, and even like, this isn't a bad derby, but it's still not one that would exactly get your pulses racing. And Aidan O'Brien is taking his star horse. If City of Troy were here, it was pointed out to me during the week, sure, if City of Troy turned up, it'd be a cakewalk. But if City of Troy turned up, a lot of people would be far more inclined to go, because I'm not going to get excited about Ambient Friendly or Los Angeles. You know, they're two very good horses, but they're not going to be any City of Troy. And that's been a factor, JD. But the Curragh is not alone in terms of racetracks in Ireland are struggling to get people to go day to day. That's a fact, because you can watch it at home, you can watch it on your phone. It's very, very comfortable. There are a lot of 35-minute gas between races. It's making it a very, very long day. And the Curragh is not alone there. But if the Curragh cannot, over 3 days of the year, jazz up this festival and get people going over the weekend, it has to look at itself, because it shouldn't be that hard. It really shouldn't be that hard. If I were to bring anyone to the Curragh on Sunday, he or she would 100% enjoy the day out. It's as simple as that. So there's something not happening here.
Ascot was interesting. You speak about that, and Julian Muscat wrote about it in the Post again this week about how Cheltenham could learn from Royal Ascot. Talked about the fact that it was 35 races, only 9 Group 1s or Grade 1s. Cheltenham has 13 out of 27 races, and there was only one odds-on shot, and no Aidan O'Brien winner for handicap. It was fascinating read, and that
one odds-on shot.
Only one odds-on shot in 35 races.
That's incredible. I didn't know. That's incredible.
Just shows how competitive it was, how varied it was, how many different, even like Isla Jura, who I put up in the members last week, Callum Shepherd, you could see the joy, and even the story from, was it Colin Keane and his dad?
And his dad, yeah. Yeah, and the syndicate. I have to say, and somebody asked me this during the week, like, what do you enjoy more now, Royal Ascot or Cheltenham? And I have to say Royal Ascot, and I can't believe I'm saying that, because it's really competitive, and just, I haven't gone yet. I think that's something we might need to do next year and get it right. But speak to people who were there this year, the Irish people who weren't necessarily big flat fans, are like, absolutely loved it. Every aspect to it, loved it, and it wasn't extortionate as well. The aspect of the location of Ascot relative to London is probably a help as well. But we can certainly look at it.
Just to go through the Derby then, and we have 8 runners declared for the big one on Sunday at the Curragh. So lots of horses to go through here, just to bring up the card here.
Another point to make here as well, the 8 runners is at the behest of Coolmore, which in order to make the race as competitive as possible for the World Pool, which is quite interesting because Coolmore has been intrinsically linked to the Curragh for a long time now, and has been and was back in the Curragh to have the Derby and the Irish Champion Stakes on, even during its redevelopment, which was controversial. But basically only because of Coolmore are there 8 runners in the race, and that's important for the World Pool, which is worth plenty of money for the Curragh.
Ambiente Friendly, so was second in the Epsom Derby behind City of Troy. Travelled really well, settled. Like, I didn't think a horse out of Glen Eagles would be doing this in an Epsom Derby, but handled the undulations as you'd expect from a horse that won at Lingfield. And it was a clear second, so something will have to go and overturn it. Is he worthy favourite? I mean, probably between him and Los Angeles for favouritism when we get to the day itself.
Well, that's a good point, because this race has been interesting in the sense of the market, and the market is very much dictated by, I would say, connections of the lads, because Coolmore has this race absolutely by the horns. It can dictate exactly what happens in this race pace-wise, like when Fame and Glory won it around the time CC Stars didn't run the Irish Derby, but Fame and Glory, I remember that day he was taking on a horse who Richard Hughes rode him at Epsom. He ran very well. I can't remember the horse now, but basically that day you knew exactly what was going to happen by the market in terms of the pace was going to be for Fame and Glory. And with the Euphrates, and more specifically Euphoric in the race, Grosvenor Square as well. These are 3 horses.
But did they not do that at Epsom with Euphoric? It didn't work there. It worked for City of Troy, but didn't work for Los Angeles.
They did, but so this is the thing. They don't have City of Troy here now, so City of Troy isn't this dour stare, whereas Los Angeles for me looks more of a
Ledger type.
Yeah, like more of a 1.6 horse. If this race were won over 1.2 miles, Ambient Friendly for me would beat him. I'd be very confident he'd beat him. If they run it at a scorching pace over 1.5 miles, which I think they will, that could make it interest for Ambient Friendly. But for me, that will help him settle as well. So
yeah.
I think tactics will be fascinating, and often is in the race. But Ambient Friendly for me, JD, I don't really see any negative. I love the way he travelled at Epsom. As you say, Glen Eagles, I don't think he's ever had a classic winner. Camelot, who's the sire of Los Angeles, these are run-of-the-mill stallions by Coolmore standards. They're not going to make them fortunes going forward. But Ambient Friendly for me, I do feel is the horse to beat. The one that obviously Matsuri is the dark one, because we don't really know how good he might be.
And Los Angeles, I just feel that it was too much made of it at Epsom. Like, he was just up at the front quite early, wasn't put to sleep. Maybe too much use of him might be an opinion to have. With a Holder Pride, would it be different with Ryan Moore?
Yeah, he's not going to be ridden the same way.
No, will that improve his chance of winning this then?
Yeah, it will. And, in fairness at Epsom, I'm not saying they rode other horses in the race with a view to City of Troy, but there was one horse in that race that mattered to them. The rest, really, with all due respect, if Los Angeles went to stud tomorrow, he would barely be 10 grand. Honestly, he's not. He's just, City of Troy means everything to Coolmore and Ballydoyle. And in fairness to Aidan, he left us on no uncertain terms that City of Troy was well better than everything else in the Derby before the race. He told us this time and time again. And Los Angeles wasn't ridden necessarily as their best horse in the race. Here he will be.
Yeah. Now, this Matsuri...
Who will track who? Will he track Ambient Friendly? Or will it be the other way around?
See, Los Angeles had every chance because he was in the slipstream of Euphoric, but he just didn't pick up enough.
Yeah, it wasn't a crazy pace. Euphoric, Euphoric ridden by Declan McDonough again, who rode him at Leopardstown, and he knows the horse well. And sometimes horses have gotten away in the Irish Derby and won it.
That's it, from the front.
From the front. I don't really see that happen here, but the fact that Coolmore... It's an interesting narrative, and I do believe the spin, or whatever you want to call it, or what Coolmore has said is that we're putting 4 horses in the race to ensure 8 runners. I entirely believe that, but it also helps them we've half the field here, so we can kind of work out how this race is going to work out.
Matsuri, I do like it 7-1, I have to say, because if you're looking for something to be a bit of a different argument here, Out of See the Stars might have beaten Trees at Leicester, might be a horse that is deceptively good, but he's visually very impressive, travelled strongly. The turn of foot was unleashed, and it is very uncertain how good he is, but this is the plan. I do think he's got possibilities.
Definite possibilities. You say he might have beaten trees at Leicester. He didn't beat bad horses, to be fair, and he bolted up. Like, he started off, he was beaten first time out, but then he won at Kempton, so he didn't have the most. He win on the all-weather. You would say, well, what is he? But the last day he was sent off 11-10. Wears a hood, so he's a little bit keen. He's actually out of a Long Cane Casey. I don't know if you remember that horse.
No.
So Long Cane Casey was one of the biggest gambles in my lifetime, I think, at the Galway Festival. She were in a handicap for Dermot Weldoff, 67 maybe or something like that. I'm off the top of my head anyway. Pat Smullen rode, the late great Pat Smullen, and she was beaten. And it was one of these races in Galway where you've got this handicap lot, but things went slightly awry on the day, and she ended up then, of course, being rated like 100 or whatever it was afterwards. But she was by Oratorio, and she's produced this horse by See the Stars. Fascinating runner. Now rated 102, should be nowhere near good enough to win any derby, but he's by far the most interesting runner in the race if you don't like the top two.
Yeah, we've got Grosvenor Square in there, half brother to the former Irish Derby winner Santiago, third in the Chester Vase. I should come on for that. Has to prove he acts on good ground, which we're expecting at the Curragh on Sunday. We also have Euphoric, as I say, pacemaker, ninth at Epsom. Hard to see him being what's that horse who won? Wings of Eagles or one of these types. Keeper's Heart does not convince me as a stare. I couldn't win a listed race at Leopardstown. Sunway won a Group 1 as a 2-year-old in France, but was also put in his place by Rosalian last year and was 7th in the French Derby. That doesn't suggest to me he has a class for this. And the Euphrates is out of Frankel and needs to prove that he stays. Was 5th over the distance at Royal Ascot and needs to overturn form anyway with Ambient Friendly from the Lingfield trial. So it seems like the market actually has this right with Ambient Friendly, Los Angeles and Matsuri, the top three. The
only if you're listening to us here and you're like, they're not convincing me on anything, and that mightn't be for the first time, JD, be it on football or racing. If the Euphrates, named after the river in the Middle East, if the Euphrates is quite slow, he won't be. If they ask him to go off hard and lie up at the pace, I think he will struggle because he's not that quick. And if he's ridden in an optimum manner by Dylan Brown McMonigal, I could see him finishing the first three because he will stay going. And in fairness, he didn't run badly in a good race at Ascot.
So your pick for the Derby, I'm going to go each way with Matsuri for my Make Mine a Double J. Have you got one for the Derby, or are you going to go with something else for Make Mine a Double J?
Make Mine a Double J. I'm not going to go with the Derby. My selection of the Derby is actually Ambiente Friendly. My selection for Make Mine a Double J, I'm going to give one for Saturday, if that's all right.
Yeah, do.
Which we're going to talk about later on in the show. And it's the 255, the Albasti Equerel Dubai International Stakes. Now, Edward O'Grady wouldn't be known for having that many horses on the flat, but Equerel Secret, who's available at 20-1 as I record this. I think he's a lovely each way bet. If the 8 turn out, he's only developing with racing, and this is his trip. He's a nice each way bet at that price.
Seamus Heffernan to ride this one. Was third behind Chief Little Rock last time at the Curragh.
Interesting weekend for Seamus Heffernan as well, because he's missing out on some very, very good rides because of the, severing of his relationship or whatever it is with Ballydoyle. I mean, he hasn't been riding for Aidan O'Brien at all this year. Declan McDonough has picked up a lot of the pieces, but it was commented on the amount of riders that Aidan O'Brien used last week across Ireland and Ascot was extraordinary. Seamus Heffernan wasn't one of them. He's had plenty of luck in the Irish Derby, obviously, but this is one weekend where if he were having second thoughts about the fact that he's not there, this would be the weekend.
Curragh Secret for Johnny Ward, Make Man a Double J, 20-1 each way in the 255 of the Curragh on Saturday. I'm going for Matsuri in the Derby on Sunday, 405, 7-1 each way for an English winner of the Irish Derby. So this is the Racing Pod on Off the Ball. If you're listening to the free version of the podcast, we're leaving you here. But if you're looking for more, including our look ahead to Saturday, the Curragh, and the weekend handicaps at the Kildare track, go to offtheball.com/join to subscribe and get the full podcast with all of our racing tips, insights and stories from the week's action.